Welcome, Mayor Wu. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Very good. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, we're going to start officially. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, bienvenidos. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I'm honored and privileged to welcome all of you to a bienvenida to our Mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu, by a delegation of Latino leaders represented a diversity of fields, industries, and perspectives. We've been wanting to host this bienvenida, and we are just so happy that we finally have the time with Mayor Wu to have this discussion. Mayor Wu, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this virtual space. We wish we could have done this in person, but this time around we do it virtually. The next one is gonna be a fiesta with you, hopefully, where we can all be in person. My name is Rosario Viera Minaya, and on behalf not only of Amplify Latinx, but also of Latino Power Coalition, I wanna thank you for your time and attention this afternoon. This was set up as an intimate gathering. It's not that intimate when you talk about Latinos, we show up, but it is a private invitation only virtual event where we wanted to make sure that we are engaging you in a discussion with influential Latino community leaders in Boston. Most of the people here that you see represented in the screen are leaders that should not be strangers to you. Many of them you already know for many years. And those of the leaders that you don't know, we would love to introduce you this evening to these individuals. We also share a document with all of our informations, our bios, our LinkedIns, so you know who we are and you can reach each one of us. So many of these leaders have been at a table in conversations with you as you were presenting your agenda, and even before in the many positions and aspects that you have led throughout the city. We are here because as you continue exercising leadership in the city of Boston, we want to continue being involved in the conversations. And at the same time, we want to bring the perspectives of the Latino community in Boston into the discussion. Today, we want to briefly hear about your priorities, but also about the updates on what are some of the major areas that you've been focusing on during your time in office so far. This is also an opportunity for community leaders represented here today to share sector-based updates, issues, and assets from the perspective of the Latino community. We want to leave this meeting today with a better understanding of your priorities, but also with ideas and ways on how we can be of service to your administration in advancing the city's priorities, including talent recruitment for boards, commissions, and any open positions, economic development and opportunities, and community building. We hope that this meeting is also a platform to strengthen the foundation for future working relationships with your office and your cabinet. We are excited that members of your cabinet are also joining us today. Before we hear directly from you, Mayor Wu, I want to make sure that you know who's in the space today. We have a lot of amazing people, a lot of talent here, people that I admire, that I learned so much from, but also that we have learned from each other, and they've been leading for many, many years in the city. I'm going to ask our leaders to briefly introduce yourselves with your name and affiliation. If you can share quickly, we only have 10 seconds for each one of you to be able to do this. I know that we can do it. So please talk fast. Let's keep our time for introductions tight, and let's take as much time as we can in this hour to focus on the discussion. So I'm gonna ask the first person that I see to my right to introduce herself, and then that person, please call the next person. Corinne, I can see you, Corinne Reynolds. If you can introduce yourself, 10 seconds.
Alrighty. Hello, everyone. My name is Corinne Reynolds, and I lead economic development programmatic work at the Boston Foundation. I will kick it over to the person to my right, which is Grace.
Buenas tardes, mi gente. Good afternoon, Mayor Wu. My name is Grace Moreno, and I am the Executive Director, CEO of the Massachusetts LGBT Chamber of Commerce. I will pass it to Manny Cruz.
Good afternoon. Buenas tardes, Mayor Wu. My name is Manny Cruz, and I am the Advocacy Director of Massachusetts at Latinos for Education. I lead our coalition work around educator diversity in early college, and I will pass it along to Christine Acevedo.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Mayor Wu. It's great to see you. I'm Christina Acevedo. I'm the operations manager here with Rosario and Amplify Latinx. And I'm going to pass it to Jesus.
Hola, my name is Jesus Garcia, and I am the new outreach coordinator for the Power program in Amplify Latinx. And thank you for being here with us today. I will pass to Gladys Oliveros.
You're muted, Gladys.
Mute.
Gladys, te está quemando con los 10 seconds.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm Gladys Oliveros. I'm the new Latino liaison for the mayor. Mayor, nice to see you. And please help me, who is the next? Thomas?
Tomas Gonzalez. I am one of the board members at Amplify Latinx. I chair the policy committee, and I'm one of the owners of one of the dispensaries here in the city of Boston. It's a pleasure to see you, Mayor, and a pleasure to be here with everybody today. I'm gonna pass it on to Dr. Joseph Betancourt.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Wu. Joe Betancourt, Senior Vice President for Equity and Community Health at Mass General Hospital. I will pass it on to Nahir Torres.
Joseph. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mayor Wu, and thank you to Amplify Latinx for organizing this. My name is Naid Torres. I'm the Senior Program Officer for the Hyams Foundation, and I will pass it on to Evelyn.
Buenas tardes. Great to see you, Mayor Wu, which is really amazing. I've known Mayor Wu for a while, so it's great to see her in this capacity. I am on board of Amplify Latinx, and I'm at the Boston Foundation with the Latino Equity Fund. I'd love to turn it over to Lorna.
Thank you. Buenas tardes. Good afternoon, Mayor Wu. I'm Lorna Rivera. I'm a professor of Latino Studies, former school committee member, and the director of the Gaston Institute for Latino Community Development and Public Policy at UMass Boston. And I will kick it over to Delia.
Buenos dias, Mayor and everyone else. So Delia Arellano Weddleton, and I'm the Director of Engagement and Partnerships at the Nellie Mae Education Foundation. I will pass it over to Jim Canales.
Good afternoon, Mayor Wu. Jim Canales with the Bar Foundation. Nice to see you. And I will pass it over to Iván Espinosa Madrigal.
Gracias, Jim, and it's a pleasure to be here with so many friends. Mayor, always a pleasure to see you. You light up every room, and it's wonderful to be here in community with you. Iván from Lawyers for Civil Rights. I am going to pass it on to my friend Eneida Roman.
Iván, buenas tardes a todos. It's wonderful to see all your beautiful faces on screen. I wish, like Rosario said, that we were in person, but this will do for now. Eneida Roman, Mayor Wu, thank you so much for always being a champion and a friend. We're delighted to be here with you. For those of you who do not know me, I'm a co-founder and co-chair of Amplify Latinx. And on my personal time, I run a law office, a law practice here in Boston. Thank you. And I see, okay, so Grace already went, Manny already went. All the people at the top, hold on. Selena, you're next.
Gracias, Eneida. Good afternoon, and Mayor Wu, nice to see you again. Thank you for visiting Heights Square Task Force not too long ago. So Executive Director of Heights Square Task Force, also a member of the Greater Boston Latino Network, and as a proud Salvadoreña. So nice to see everyone. And with that, I'll pass it over to Cynthia.
From one fellow Salvadoreña to the next. Buenas tardes, Mayor Wu. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon to Amplify Latinx for organizing this. I'm Cynthia Orellana. I'm the Director of the Office of Community Partnerships at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. I'm going to pass it on to Doctora Mariel Novas.
Yay. Hi, everybody. Saludos. Alcaldesa, I miss you so much. I'm Mariel. I am the new Chief of Learning and Community Engagement at the Museum of Fine Arts, and a big fan of so many of you on this call. My heart is just like soul-filled. So excited to be here. Thank you, Rosario and company, for organizing. I'll pass it on to, oh my gosh, is this Jose Maso Jr.? Your dad is amazing.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So Jose Fabio Maso, just to differentiate, but it's a pleasure to be here with you all. I am the Chief of Human Services for Mayor Wu in the City of Boston, and I will pass it off to Trevor.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Trevor Matos with Boston Indicators at the Boston Foundation. Pleasure to be here with you all. Pleasure to see you, Mayor. And I'll pass it off to Sebastián Zapata.
Hey, Mayor. Hola a todos. Sebastián Zapata. I do affordable housing loan origination and policy programming at Mass Housing. And I will pass it on to Priscilla Rojas.
Hi, Mayor Wu. Priscilla Rojas here, Director of Audit and Compliance at Takeoff Technologies and Board Chair of the Boston Planning and Development Agency. I'll pass it over to Josiane.
Thank you, Priscilla. Buenas tardes a todos. Muy bueno verlos. I'm Josiane Martinez, and I'm the CEO and founder of ASG. And I pass it to Gladys Vega.
Buenas tardes, mi querida gente de Boston, y unas ganas de abrazarlos a toditos ya que no nos vemos. So next time we need to have this meeting and give lots of hugs because I miss a lot of these faces. Gladys Vega, la colaborativa, un placer de verlos a todos. Mayor Wu, de verdad te queremos mucho. Gracias. Y la paso a Tomás González.
Ya fue Tomás.
¿Ya fue? Ok.
Ya Tomás fue. Aileen, ya
Okay,
fue.
perfect.
Hi, Mayor Wu. This is Eileen Alexopoulos. I am a board member of Amplify Latinx, and I'm also the Chief of Staff for the COO here at Blue Cross Blue Shield. Nice to meet you.
Beatriz.
Buenos días, mi gente. Bueno, no, buenas tardes. Perdón, que empiece la pachanga. Aquí estoy, Beatriz Abascal de Greater Boston Latino Network. Un placer de estar aquí con todos. Gracias, Mayor Wu, y a todos los que están trabajando tan fuerte para la ciudad de Boston. Y ¿a quién voy a escoger? Porque ahora está difícil la cosa. Rita Lara. Oh, perdón. Rita Lara.
Hola, gracias. Good afternoon, Mayor Wu. It's nice to see everybody. It's always nice to connect. I'm Rita Lara, and I'm with Maverick Land and Community Services in East Boston. And I will pass it to, sí, está difícil la cosa.
Karen Chacon can go next.
Karen, Samawa, no han ido ninguna de las dos.
Okay, Samawa, I will pass it to you.
Buenas tardes a todos. So nice to be with you. Samawa Arenas, founder of Floetic, and Mayor Wu, thank you for joining us. It's really wonderful to see you. And I'll turn off my video because I'm in the car and I didn't want to miss this event.
Thank you, Samawa. Karen?
Last but not least, maybe. Karen Chacon, Executive Director of Latino STEM Alliance. Hi, Mayor Wu, glad to be here. Also co-chair of Greater Boston Latino Network with my colleagues here and another proud Salvadoreña. So we're in the house today. And am I the last one or is there anyone else?
I think Mariangeli.
Yeah, we can do a little bit of the staff. Buenas tardes a todos. Mariangeli Solis Cervera, and I'm the Mayor's Chief of Equity and Inclusion. And I have two staff members that belong to the Equity and Inclusion Cabinet. I'll give them a chance as proud Latinas also to introduce themselves here. Alex, then Jennifer.
Buenas tardes a todos. It's good to see so many familiar faces. Alexandra Valdez, Executive Director of the Office of Women's Advancement.
Buenas tardes, Jennifer Vivar Wong, Executive Director of Language and Communications Access. Thank you for inviting us here.
Gracias a todos. Anyone left?
Daniel Enriquez Vidaña.
Daniel?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Wu, for joining us. My name is Daniel Enriquez Vidaña. I'm the president of Innovation Studio. We run the Roxbury Innovation Center in District Hall. Thank you for being here and with everyone else.
And we also have Juan Maldonado of Sociedad Latina.
Gracias.
He wrote a message earlier that he couldn't speak.
Okay.
Oh, there it is. Yeah. His mic's not working. Okay.
And so I believe with that, we are fully done.
Great. What an amazing group. Thank you so much for introducing yourselves. There you have it, Mayor. This is just a powerful, amazing Latino Power Coalition, and we are just so happy again to be able to host you. Please know that Amplify is providing the logistics and space, but this has been an effort by many different organizations. We joined forces to be in this room together with you today. So now I'm just gonna, with no further ado, I want to give the floor to the mayor so we can hear directly from her, and she has prepared some short remarks, I hope. But before I do that, we have Phillips that just joined us, and I wanna make sure that we give our madrina a chance to introduce herself. Phillips, I think you're muted.
Sure, thank you. Well, I'm glad that we were able to put this meeting together. Thank you, Mayor Wu. You met with us last summer when you were a candidate, Wu, and we had an opportunity to talk about some of your plans and intentions when you became elected mayor of Boston. I'm looking forward to seeing how things have progressed as you've begun to put your cabinet together and your agenda in place. And we're all here to support you. We care much about the city of Boston and the metro area. And thank you again for your leadership. And we're here to support you and support our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis. So Mayor Wu, I'm gonna open the floor for you. If you wanna say some remarks to the group, that would be great. So you know, we have also left the majority of the time today for discussion that is gonna be moderated by the one and only Ivan Espinosa Madrigal, that is going to join me very soon to lead the section. But for now, the floor is yours, Mayor Wu.
Ok, perfecto. Buenas tardes a todos. Es un honor, como siempre, estar en comunidad con ustedes. It's a real treat. Next time we will definitely have to all be either happy to host here or at one of your organizations and locations, just to be able to connect in person. It is now, let's see, June. So we are 3 days away from hitting 7 months, which is like, we're like that. I feel like Omicron was like the first month and a half, and then some other challenges along the way, which I'll get into. But the time has flown by, and what sticks out to me, even in this short span, is that one, the city is ready, and I use the term city very broadly. You know, of course, many people, first and foremost, are focused on the residents of Boston, but many people connected to our city who, due to housing prices, due to other factors, have been sort of forced and displaced from our city. So you know, this area, the community of people who care and are connected to the city of Boston are ready to see a much bolder and more urgent approach to issues and to see action and results. I've also learned in this period of time that, or been reinforced, that the challenges are primarily relational. One is organizational in terms of how our city teams are structured and supported and filled out and connected to be able to actually follow up on the issues and partner directly with residents. And then the second one is all about trust. I really believe that if we can hold the trust of community members, partner organizations, different sectors across the city, there is nothing that we don't have the resources and know-how to be able to get done. But because of past history, because of legal structures, there are many ways to unravel that trust that we need to be weaving back together. For me, a really important part of that is not only setting expectations, being clear about where we're aiming for, and trying to demonstrate and move, sometimes with small actions and sometimes with big actions every day towards that vision that we laid out, and to do exactly what we said we would do over the course of the campaign and do our best to follow up and stay connected. Although I'm so sorry, Phyllis, I know in others it's been 6 months later than I thought it would be. But also it's really important just to tell the truth. In a lot of situations, I feel like we have lost trust because the city has been either afraid, and here I mean city as in city government, either afraid to kind of run away from hard conversations about what trade-offs are or who is actually receiving more of their share, or how we get something done or how hard it is to do something. And so I'm trying to lean in a lot more, you know, for example, in conversations around our schools, around public safety, around the areas where I think we have seen more of a breakdown in trust, and to both lay out the plan, but also be honest and that sometimes we are falling short and we didn't mean to. Sometimes we are falling short because we didn't aim where we needed to be aiming. And most of all, we want to repair and move forward, and that takes continued partnership. And so we are working every day to build the foundation for that, so that every day we get better at what we're doing on this end and that the whole community gets stronger. I would say, just to quickly answer some of the questions that Rosario had teed up in the beginning, in terms of my priorities, I say in every cabinet meeting, and I know the chiefs and department heads will just like, they're probably having this in their dreams as nightmares, repeating this phrase over and over again, but 3 things about how our administration does business, approaches our job. One is we do big things by getting the small things right, that in order to take on a Green New Deal for Boston, we have to be responsive when residents reach out for constituent services. In order to deliver the supports for the educational system that we deserve, families need to feel like they have a clear pathway to staying in the school system, and that we're there when there are questions and issues and complaints that need to be addressed. The second big thing is our job is to get City Hall out of City Hall into our neighborhoods, really meet people where they are. That is both physically in terms of where we are setting up connection points, but also just in our approach and where leadership comes from and who is driving the solutions and decision-making and agenda. And then the third is to really embrace the possibility of Boston and of our city government to be a connecting force in Boston at this moment. And so we've been trying in a lot of spaces internally and externally to say, you know, acknowledge that things have been done a certain way and that it can be scary or hard or expensive or expensive seeming or complex to do things a different way. But in fact, here's what we're missing out on by not actually tackling root causes and moving on the issues that we should be moving on. Tactically, what has been taking up my time, our school superintendent search and police commissioner search are like this close. Both sets of search committees are moving from their first round to their second round of interviews. And I'm really excited about where we'll land. I don't know for sure in either one of those, but we have some really great options. And both processes were guided initially by very strong participation in community feedback and listening first, so that even before going out to identify who we would talk to, they set up a job description of what we were looking for. We're also just earlier today, 2.5 hours ago, officially transmitted back to the city council the final step in terms of the administration's role in our city budget. As you all know, this year was a slightly different process, a more collaborative process between city council and mayor's office, where the council proposed that we presented an opening draft. The council then proposed their own version of the budget. And then today we responded with a version of the budget that the council will take a final vote on 2 weeks from now, to either keep our version, this latest one, or revert back to their proposal. And so I think some highlights of that budget include one, the creation of several new parts within our infrastructure as a city to again, meet people where they are and highlight the needs and resources that are available. We have our new Office of LGBTQ+ Advancement, our new Office of Black Male Advancement, new Office of Food Justice, of Early Childhood I think I might be missing some new creations there. We've also restructured, as Priscilla knows, we've restructured a little bit in how planning and development fit together with a new chief of planning role that is coming on the city side to help transition and think through reforms to be more community focused and grounded in planning, zoning, and development. I would say that if someone from outside Boston, or I guess if anyone, someone from inside Boston too, if someone said, what does success look like at the end of the term, or 2 years from now, I would like our actions as a city to show and also point in the future to Boston being the greenest city in America, a city for everyone, and a city where families can thrive. And so that really requires, I think, in some ways, shifting our timescales of how we think about things. Of course, we're responding to urgent, immediate challenges every single day. But I think in the past, sometimes that has led to Band-Aids on solutions instead of, okay, how do we ensure our actions right now? Maybe it will take longer or require a little more investment, but in fact, it's laying a stronger foundation for the future for our next generations and for where we need to be, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and not just kind of election cycle by election cycle. So those are all, I think, the biggest pieces of it. I'm trying to think if there are other things top of mind. As we head into summer, okay, I'll just leave this piece of it because it's kind of always part of the conversation, unfortunately, these days. Wherever I go in the city, we have to prepare for protesters. It is just sort of the dynamic of politics and civil society in 2022. Again, I think that stems from a breakdown in trust over many, many years between people in government, and then now also proliferation of various other forces nationally. But I think what I hope is that Boston can be an example of bold and urgent policies, as well as inclusive and empowering politics. And sometimes that can seem a fine line of, I'm coming from a space where, as a city councilor, I'm going to lead the charge in shining the spotlight on what is not working and the injustices that we are moving to highlight and create pressure externally to change and to force accountability. On the executive side now, I hope to continue earning people's trust by showing as much urgency in how we're moving, but being, again, honest and realistic about how we build the organizational capacity to make changes stick and to change our processes at the core so people, our residents, feel like they are deeply embedded in leading the conversation, and that in Boston, there are different ways of influencing the process than just showing up at someone's house at 7 a.m., for example. So I think we're getting there. I feel really good about this next little bit. I think a month from now, if we're to run into each other or have our in-person thing a month from now, after our police commissioner and school superintendent choices are public, and after we've gotten through this school year and some of the planning for next school year, I think we'll see that Boston has always been just a few steps from being able to connect all the pieces. And we're quickly trying to show progress on the big things, but in some ways, more importantly, on the little things every single day to keep us moving in that direction. But thank you so much for your leadership, your vision, your advocacy. I probably should, knowing this group, and remembering our conversation a couple months ago, I probably should have come with the statistics on our cabinet representation and demographics. I mean, I feel good about where we are. It hasn't, I don't think I've done the full tabulation recently because we keep adding people here and there, but there are some cabinet members who represent the Latino community who are not here as well. We will have to make sure you all wrap around. Santiago Garces, our new Chief Information Officer, just moved to Boston about 3 weeks ago at this point, and really, really excited for his leadership along with our Chief Digital Officer, Julia. Who else am I missing, Mari or Jose? I think, okay, yeah. So we will come back with the full accounting and reporting of numbers so we can compare against what we were talking about during the campaign trail. But thank you so much, and representation of this community, and most importantly, leadership from this community has been incredibly important to me.
Thank you so much, Mayor Wu. We really appreciate you walking us through priorities and successes that you have already accomplished in the time that you've been in office. And we want, as you said, we want to start connecting all of those things to the priorities and issues that are affecting directly the Latino community. So this is a perfect segue to move into a moderated part of the discussion, so we can have some time to go a little deeper in some of the things that you have mentioned and other things that we want to bring up. So you will have a chance to engage with the leaders who are going to speak to those issues. So now I'm going to invite Ivan to join me and help me moderate this section. Thank you, Ivan.
Gracias, Rosario. Thank you, Mayor, for those remarks, both meaningful and touching. And I want to apologize, just regret that you deal with the protesters. It is just something none of us should have to deal with. And so I just want to express that, and I think that's a sign of, people are nervous about some of the things that could be coming down the pike, and so I try to think about it that way, even though, right, but I love the themes that you have developed around transparency, connectivity, green city, and the disruption that you're trying to create in Boston institutions, and so I want to go deeper into this by inviting a couple of our guests to lean in here. And maybe because the issue of the pandemic is so omnipresent, I want to start with Dr. Betancourt so that we could bring the health issue into the mix. Dr. Betancourt, should we just unspotlight us? Oh, okay, somebody's handling the spotlight. Okay, great. I should Amplify Latinx runs a tight ship. So, okay, great. So Dr. Betancourt, why don't I invite you to the fold to share with us aspects of the pandemic that remain with us, right? And how we deal with essentially a pandemic that has become endemic, and the consequences in the lived experiences of the people in Boston, particularly people of color and low-income people. And I don't just want to focus on illness, which is obviously concerning to all of us, but also mental health and other types of manifestations. And so, Doctor, please.
Great, thank you, Mayor Wu. Again, great to be here with my friends and colleagues. It was an honor to be part of the task force on COVID-19 as well. And so I'm so thankful for your leadership and thankful that you were here with us. Certainly, as was mentioned, the pandemic had a disproportionate impact on our communities of color, locally and nationally. So this wasn't unique to us for all the reasons that we've discussed. And so there's so much interconnectedness in our discussion around health, to food insecurity, to living wage, to all these key aspects that we call the social determinants of health. And so critical. And yes, we bear the brunt and the burden of that. So I guess I wanted to get your perspective. We've seen some very proactive cities talk about health in all policies. And I guess, a question that I'd like to throw out is there an opportunity for us to really think about equity in all policies, and how we might think about that even more relative to the Latino, Latina community, Latinx community here in Boston? We've had so many people on the screen who've worked so hard to quite simply save lives. But to save lives, it's taken all types of efforts, including feeding people and doing the most basic things. So, and of course, mental health has been a big issue, substance abuse disorder, big issue. And so how do we think proactively to, again, address these longstanding disparities made bigger? And I'd end by saying that, 20 years ago, we had the privilege of Mayor Menino using the city to convene a group of healthcare leaders and business leaders to really think about how we might address disparities. So a lot in there, but nothing that I know you haven't thought about and probably already have a solution to. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your leadership and always being a presence and delight at various events as well. So I think, again, there are some organizational pieces that needed to be in place before we could even, you could say health and all as much as you want, but unless we change some of the ways that decisions were made and structured in Boston, we weren't going to get to health and all or equity and all. One of the first changes that we made was to directly elevate the Boston Public Health Commission into the cabinet, and Dr. Pasola Ojikutu has been such a blessing for our city, infectious disease doctor with a specific background, practice, and focus on equity, leading our efforts and ensuring that from the work happening in the area centered at Mass Ave and Milne Cass Boulevard to how BPHC has been supporting and working directly with our school system during this time of the pandemic, with Dr. Sari Sanchez specifically deployed full-time from the Health Commission over to Boston Public Schools to monitor and provide recommendations to how we are thinking about our housing policies and the work ahead. We're really, I think both from the health and all, health equity and all lens, again, trust is really important. And here sometimes, especially in the context of the pandemic, it feels like trust has to come from people not only understanding why policy decisions or prescriptions are being made, but how they're going to continue being made in the future. Especially as information has been changing and evolving and we've learned more about how to track and treat COVID, it has felt a little bit like in the lurching back and forth, people are getting tired, a certain segment of the population is getting tired of hearing anything about COVID when it is very much still present. And so you look at the example, I mean, La Colaborativa, just like it blows any sense of barriers away when you see vaccination rates, you see the food security efforts, and that's community-based leadership and organizing. And so our approach is very much to provide the space to change our organizational structures. In addition to the change with BPHC, we've created a new Center for Behavioral Health and added a new Chief Behavioral Health Officer who will be officially announced. I think it might be tomorrow, actually, sometime this week, I believe. And he comes with a background and connection to Children's Hospital, particularly focusing on young people and equity and understanding community-based outreach as well. And so we'll have a little bit, I think in July, our plan is to start to convene specifically around mental health as the epidemic coming out of the pandemic in the city. And then in general, we won't know how we are doing or how we are falling short unless we continue to track and monitor the steps along the way. And so part of our work, for example, at Mass and Cass was to introduce very specific surveys of the entire community of people unhoused at Mass and Cass at various points. That has given us a tremendous amount of specialized, individualized information on the services needed, and in addition to numbers and data. I think that approach and having some sort of convening that would ensure that we could draw on all our community partners in coming to consensus around what are our touchstones in terms of what we will be measuring and reporting back on will then allow our organizational investments to really have full impact. The last bit is we are waiting and fingers crossed, once the city council moves on the city's operating budget, the next piece that we would like to partner with them on to get out the door is our federal recovery spending plan. We have put forward the entirety of that funding, meant to be coordinated across those priorities, but also to then double and triply reinforce investments being made in the capital budget and the operations budget. So it's not all in silos. So I hope that will move quickly too, because there's a large component in there about how we institutionalize health and health equity in particular in city operations.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Dr. Betancourt. I love Dr. Betancourt's emphasis on social determinants of health. I love the connections we're hearing about how the city is taking this seriously. I think that is terrific. And I want to build on this. And one more thing. Budgets reflect priorities. And so the fact that we're even talking about funding is just, it's right on point. And I want to build on the social determinants of health question by actually turning to one of the first responder groups on the ground. And there's several in this Zoom, but we have Gladys Vega of La Colaborativa, who has been, a first responder focusing on many of these issues of social determinants of health. And I love that Dr. Betancourt put living wage, among other things, on the table. And Gladys, we are going to spotlight you now. And I want to turn to you on the labor, workers, workplace issues so that you can help illuminate some of this and talk to the mayor about it.
Sure, so un placer por tenerme aquí y muchísimas gracias por adoptarme en su ciudad de Boston. So Latinos, we have continued to recover remarkably, right? We are working, during the pandemic we worked, we have continued to work. We are creating new business. We are creating childcare co-ops. We're creating ways where we can make money. If you tell a Latino in the city of Chelsea, East Boston, Revere, or anywhere, even if you're undocumented, can you get an IT number so that we can give you ESL classes? We can immediately, even if you don't know English, we will find you a job, but let's get you an IT number so you can immediately work for that survival job, right? Maintaining the household until we train you. So even there was a study that showed that even elder Latinos are going back to work in large numbers. So we have been sort of like making sure that we are Latinos will be the drive and are the drive right now that are recovering in Massachusetts, that will be recovering in America. There's no secret about that. So my question to you, and of course it's because we have no choice. We have no choice. We come to this country where nobody wants us and we remain here and we look different and we're forced to work in these jobs where we at times need to work 3 jobs in order for us to get a decent salary. So knowing all that, what are you doing different in order to address this new wave of Latinos that have continued to move to Massachusetts and have continued to build, this state regardless of pandemic, before the pandemic, and who have also shown that in the communities they live, there's lots of poverty. So I want to make sure that you respond to sort of like, what are you doing creatively in order for you to innovate programs that allows for Latinos to become professionals, but also to work that good paying job so they don't have to work 3 jobs.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I will start with a couple things and I'm going to toss it over, if it's okay, to Alex for a little bit, because some of the innovation has been happening under her, especially as we think about the childcare industry as one example. But I would say first and foremost that the best place to innovate is in the community, right? At the end of the day, city government and the ways in which our processes are structured and our systems are, we can test things out and we can pilot different initiatives and see how that connects with larger ripple effects. And then we can make the case and advocate. So whether it's our fare-free bus lines that we are still hoping to partner with Chelsea on, we have a little pool set aside of funding to do some cross municipality bus lines as well. But in some ways, the fastest innovation is to be supporting community organizations doing that work on the ground. And so more and more in different places, the grant making has been happening directly to community, whether it's on the arts and culture side or provision of youth jobs and economic opportunity, or gearing up specific job training programs, then unlock different industries like our Green Jobs Initiative, that is then tied to Madison Park and our vocational education system to really try to make that whole circle connect. We are also doing our best to put our money where our mouth is and use the city's contracting power, the spending power that we are using, although I know Ivan has more to say on the procurement side of things and what we should be doing. But really to move faster and move differently, we created a sheltered market program for the very first time that would test out just 6 contracts over the course of our first 6 months of how we look at the disparity study that was done, which identified huge disparities, particularly for Black and Latino communities in specific industries, and then therefore being able to then direct contracts in those industries, particularly to Black and Latino businesses. And so we've done, I think, 4 out of those 6 and have decided it's already been such a huge success that we don't need to wait to open up that program and ask for a universal authorization from the city council. So we'll be moving forward to expand that. We, I hope some folks might have heard that we had our largest ever non-construction contract go to a business of color. City Fresh Foods won the Boston Public Schools meals contract. And this is a template where they are a partially and transitioning into a worker-owned co-op. And then they're getting a major contract from the city so that on the front end, we're putting our resources to a locally owned Roxbury-based business. And then as that continues through that cycle, that business's profits then go directly to employees who can then stay in the city, stabilize their housing costs and further strengthen our communities. And so we need to make sure that that continues with all the large contracts that we've had. And then Alex, do you want to talk a little bit about the childcare program and how we're trying to create more entrepreneurship activity there too?
Actually, maybe we could hold Alex for the chiefs and city hall officials panel, just because I know we have limited time with you, Mayor. But Alex, you're on for that topic shortly.
Well, I will just say, under her leadership, we've had more cohorts than ever before of within our childcare entrepreneurship program, including Spanish language only, Spanish language focused cohorts that have been really incredible to see the sense of community built and just the word of mouth then that can spread about how to plug into city services and resources available to continue making sure that our funding is going directly into closing gaps in our city and supporting our residents.
That's great. That's great. And I want to turn to, I think organically, as we talk about work, the next issue that comes to mind is, of course, housing, because work and housing are going to be critical as part of the economic recovery phases here. And so let's spotlight Sebastián Zapata for the housing component. And Mayor, thank you for all of that talk on how workers and centering their experiences is going to be critical for Boston moving forward. I hope we hear some interesting stuff with housing as well. Sebastián, take it away.
Great, thank you, Ivan. Thank you, Mayor, once again for being here with us today. So as we all know, housing is a critical component for so many different determinants. I think in particular, when we're talking about the pandemic, the first and foremost sort of protection anyone had before there was vaccine was stable housing, right? We had to quarantine inside. And so you mentioned it at the top of your remarks about the rising costs of housing and sort of how do you combat displacement. And so I'm wondering, in particular, when it comes to the Latinx population in Greater Boston and Suffolk County, there are 20% of us who are severely rent burdened. They spend 50% or more of their housing income on housing itself. Sort of what strategies are you looking at, is your administration looking at, to help people remain in Boston with rents that are more affordable, both that are sort of in the short term, but also long term? And then also when thinking about wealth creation and sort of the main vehicle being home ownership, there is a massive disparity between white homeowners in Greater Boston. 66% of whites are homeowners versus only 30% of Hispanic, Latino, Latinx folks. How is your administration going to bridge that gap, or at least help to bridge that gap? And finally, on that point, if it's not home ownership to help build generational wealth, what opportunities are you thinking about to help with that gap as well? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'm jotting down a couple notes so I can try to be concise and go through the list. First, on rents, we are throwing everything we have from the city, state, federal resources that we've been given into housing. I've been clear from the beginning that housing is going to be the focus of our recovery package. It is the foundation to our recovery. And so the proposal across all the sources is $385 million over a 2 to 3 year period that would go to specifically creating new affordable housing and preserving it. Situations like $50 million to add on top of the Mildred Haley renovations in terms of public housing that we are preserving in Jamaica Plain or Jamaica Plain Roxbury Water, as well as oftentimes the city can help make projects work that CDCs or other community organizations are proposing with that last slice of funding. And so earlier in the year, we had announced that $40 million in grants from the city to close those gaps in financing had produced more than 750 units of affordable housing that are then forever permanently deed restricted moving forward. So it's a huge return on our investment when we can actually partner with community organizations, whether it's East Boston, POA, or some of our other CDCs in moving projects. JPNDC has a bunch of them as well. We're also using that funding to offer short-term relief, municipal rental vouchers, in addition to the vouchers that state can offer, just to expand the capacity. We're using that to create low threshold supportive housing to help relieve pressure on the housing pipeline from various angles, and to boost home ownership, the down payment assistance to work with programs like MAHA and boosting the One Plus Boston program, where there's a financial education and class for first-time home buyers, particularly first-generation home buyers, and then down payment assistance. We're also well underway with our Rent Stabilization Advisory Committee, and the goal is to submit legislation that this group, representing a very wide range of perspectives, so I'm excited to see what they come up with, to propose that in the next legislative session. And then I would say, here's an example of a small thing and then a big thing. The small thing is at East Boston, for example, we are also looking at how we can connect housing to unlock the barriers for healthier, more climate resilient housing as well. Our East Boston Solarize program, which we're piloting in the neighborhood, recognizes that you can actually have tremendous financial benefit from having solar on where you live, and how that feeds into then your utilities cost and the energy that you can use, which is then cleaner and healthier, but also financially it feeds back in. But when you're renting versus when you are owning, it is so much harder to have that. And therefore we're then exacerbating the gap if we only focus on pushing solar out without really intentionally targeting it to communities and to renters in particular. So that program is an example. Okay, I'm getting a 2-minute warning from Yvonne. That we can actually go building by building and say, how do we, one, provide the upfront costs so that renters can do this and then not have to find a way to squeeze out the entire payment upfront to then start benefiting later on? How do we get around the leases or make sure they're incorporated to make this work so that we can expand from there? And then the big thing, or one example of it, is how we are thinking about the places where Boston can move a lot of new units of housing, right? Suffolk Downs, which you know very well in that area. One example, Harvard and the Beacon Yards project, straightening out the turnpike to then create a whole new neighborhood. We're working very closely. I think we're very close to potentially announcing something with the university about a first phase that would have unprecedented contributions to housing affordability, accelerate that part of the development and deliver us some of the relief right away while other parts of the development are still to come. So where we have opportunity to partner with the private sector in particular, that is where we can have real impact in making those dollars stretch.
And Mayor, I know your time is precious, and because you're giving us such rich answers,
Long, you mean
running out of time. No, this is terrific. You know, we always have to balance depth with other considerations. Before we lose you, can I just call on Grace to share some of the closing remarks she had planned, and then if folks can just entertain those who can stay for a little bit longer, we'll do a lightning round with the other city officials once the mayor drops off. But I'll turn to Grace right now, and then Manny and others will come for just a 5-minute extra period since we're running a little bit late. Grace, I'm turning to you for the closing.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Wu, for your time with us again. I want to say something. I think you're being very generous in saying that there's a breakdown in trust when it comes to the protesters that go everywhere you go. I would say that the less generous view, which is one I hold, is that the protesting is, which is highly unprecedented to any of your white male predecessors, is actually full-blown racism. The groups that do not want the changes you're bringing. When you say a city for everyone, a lot of people don't like that. And when you say a place where all families can thrive, a lot of people don't like that. And when you look at the statistics of 20% of Boston being Latina, Latinos are the biggest driver in the population growth in Boston. Latinos workforce in Suffolk County grew 60% between 2010 and 2015. And the number of Latino entrepreneurs is also growing steadily, but easily their businesses are smaller and average. And when you're pointing to wealth equity and inequality, the opportunity for growth lies in what we own, whether it be homes, whether it be our own health, if we own our health, and whether we own entrepreneurship opportunities. When you look at things like the contracts that have gone out to City Fresh and call it Phillips Communications, these are great strides that have never before come through the city. But we need to see big Latino contracts. We need to see those investments going into Latinos. I want to be able to add a, Jose Rodriguez into that list of people, because that's important to the population and the people we serve. And more importantly, what I want to say is, and I want to close this with an anecdote and a personal story. Yesterday, you joined us at the LGBTQ pop-up Pride in between a very, very busy day. One of the things that happened yesterday was that we needed 10 laborers to come help set up the stage and set up other parts. I got a call at 5 o'clock the day before because the people that we had arranged to be there couldn't be there. I quickly called 2 of the people on this list, and we had 10 Latinos show up at 6 o'clock in the morning to help the Pride come together, okay? That is who our people are. When work needs to happen, our people show up. And when I decided to pay those people very generously, they cried, Mayor, because they couldn't imagine that someone would actually value their last-minute phone call so much to pay them half of what I would have had to pay a union worker to come set up a stage and move things. That is who the Latino population is. We call to you in your amazing leadership to help us continue to bring our city forward with the people that are here, with the leaders that are here. All of us will take your call anytime. We are very proud of what you're doing, and we are here to protect you against all those protesters, because what the change that you're bringing is the change that's needed, but it's not popular. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Mayor and guests.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. I'm off to interview another one of our candidates, so I will run, but I so look forward to coming together in person. And as Rosario said, if I can make sure to get that sheet with everyone's contact information, that would be wonderful. I'd love to follow up.
We will send it to you, Mayor.
Okay, gracias. See you, everyone.
Gracias. And now we're going to do a quick lightning round with the City Hall officials that I have plugged in the chat earlier, just so folks can get to know them a little bit better, and also to hear the question on education. Can we spotlight the remaining City Hall leaders, please?
Ivan, if you don't mind calling them.
Of course. We are talking about Maria Angeli Solis Cervera, Chief of Equity, Jose Mazo, Chief of Human Services, Alexandra Valdez, Executive Director of the Mayor's Office of Women Advancement, Jennifer Vivar Wong, Executive Director of the Mayor's Office of Language and Communications Access, and Luz Gladys Oliveros, Latinx Liaison for the City of Boston. So maybe as we spotlight, we could just get started with the conversation. I'm going to go in the order that I called them out. Chief Solis Cervera, can you give us a, like a very brief, very quick summary of some of your vision in your role as Chief of Equity?
Thank you so much. I love being in a place where people can say my full name. So this feels good. Thank you. As a Chief of Equity and Inclusion, the charge that the mayor has given me and the larger staff here is how do we ensure that we are building a city for everyone and that we are seeing everyone as an asset to our community, right? So internally transforming our city practices so that every person that comes from a different country, speaks a different language, does not trust government because of all the issues of racism, homophobia, transphobia, you name it, understands that these resources they're entitled to. And so a lot of internal transforming of practices, and you'll hear a little bit from my team in just a second. I'll pause there.
Chief Mazo.
Wonderful, wonderful. I appreciate it. First and foremost, I want to thank everyone on the call for your leadership. For those of you that have had the pleasure of working with directly, just want to uplift that. Selena, High Square Task Force, Cynthia Oriana, great thought partners, and the many more of you I look forward to working closely with. I've seen from afar just the many work that you have done throughout the city. So thank you all first and foremost. For me, my charge under Human Services, just so folks know, I have a fairly large cabinet. I have Boston Centers for Families, I have Boston Public Libraries. I also have the Youth Engagement and Employment, which is our summer jobs and year-round jobs as well for our young folks. Then I have Age Strong, which was formerly the Elderly Commission, and I have Veteran Services, and I also have Office of Returning Citizens, which is not a new office yet. It is newly funded at a tune of about 1.8 million. So as we look at a city where families can thrive, that actually happens within my cabinet. So that's something I'm looking to do. I am on week 7 in my role, and definitely looking forward to making sure that within my cabinet, we have that connectivity on post-pandemic for folks to be able to get together, to re-engage, especially our elder population, our young folks that really need it as we talk about mental health issues, as we talk about job creation and security, entrepreneurship, business building. These are all the things that I'm be focused on within my cabinet, and definitely looking forward to working and partnering with you all to make sure that it happens underneath our leadership. So thank you for that.
Chief, thank you. And I'm going to turn to Alexandra Valdez.
Unmute myself. Oh, there we go. I was like, I can't unmute myself, but really short, just to give everyone time. Thank you so much for putting together the space. So nice to see so many familiar faces. But again, Alex Valdez, Women's Advancement, and just really quickly, a little bit about the Office of Women's Advancement. We are focusing so right now to help remove systematic barriers for women and those who identify as women in the city of Boston. We are going through a really amazing time where it's a possibility for us to think about rebranding and rebranding all the amazing work that we do. So please be on the lookout. You will see an email from me in your inboxes. So we would love to hear from every single one of you as we go through this rebranding process as to what does our office look like? What does the community want to see in our office when it comes to programming, when it comes to resources, or when it comes just to simply as going out in the community and serving as a point of contact. And we want to make sure that all of you in this call are very well engaged with that process. So I'm definitely looking forward to do that in that sense, and just really short. I know the mayor wanted to touch upon the Child Care Entrepreneur Fund, but it has been an ability to engage with so many small business owners, entrepreneurs, childcare providers in the city of Boston, who a great percentage of them are Latina and identify as immigrants in the city of Boston. The program leads in the process where we are able to give out grants to in-home family childcare providers, and at the same time provide them with tools where they're able to educate and expand their businesses in a way where they're able to use the resources to elevate themselves. To date, we have been able to help about half of the population, which is about 200. And in total, we have around over 430 family child care providers in the city of Boston. And our goal is to make sure that we are funding at least every single one of them. But with the newly created Office of Early Childhood, that program is just going to keep on going and elevate so much more. I'm happy to talk about a little bit longer individualized, everyone would like to, but that's sort of a gist on what we're doing in women's advancement, and I'll use my time to my colleague, Jennifer.
Jennifer, returning to you.
Thank you. So we are also tasked with a large mission, and we are a very small department, but mighty. We were just codified as a department last August, and we were able to hire. Now we went from a team of 2 to a team of 5 folks. And so our mission is to ensure that when folks are coming into the city, they are receiving services not only in their language, but in the way they prefer to communicate the most. And, you know, this work is very dear and near to my heart as an English learner myself. My parents also are learning English. They're taking English classes. So it is a large task, and I'm excited to be able to do that alongside all of you and partner with all of you. But our focus right now is to build capacity, especially as this new budget cycle comes to an end, increase capacity within our office and work in partnership with departments to ensure that they have the foundational resources they need, so that folks come in, or if they request translations, or when they're going out into the communities, they have the appropriate interpretation materials in translated languages for our communities within our neighborhoods and the languages that they prefer. So I will also bring it back to you, Ivan.
Terrific. And before we close, because we ran out of time with the mayor's panel, I wanted to give Manny from Latinos for Education an opportunity to share a little bit about the education issues that he is seeing. I know that that might not be specific to your specific agencies, but I think it's important for all of the remaining folks to hear about education, because it is embedded also in the housing, health, and workplace issues that we were just chatting about. And so I'm going to invite Manny to join us for this component.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. And I'll be succinct here, folks. Manny Cruz over at Latinos for Education. I think all of us have seen firsthand the impact of interrupted learning and what that has done to our students and our educators throughout this pandemic. And I know that Boston has its hands full with a number of educational equity related matters. But one of the pieces that I really wanted to hone in on was how we create a culture of belonging for our students, especially at a time in which mental health is a top concern for folks recovering from the pandemic. But we're also seeing within our educator workforce both the great resignation and the great retirement in our teaching force, which is really a challenge to continue to make progress, but also an opportunity to reimagine the educator workforce. And so currently in our Commonwealth, about 40% of our students are identifying as students of color, and yet only 12% of educators across our state identify the same. This is also the case in Boston Public Schools. There's that same disproportionality. The district's in a consent decree. Over 80% of the students identify as students of color, and yet we still haven't seen not parity, but at least equitable representation in classrooms around BPS. And we know what the research says about educator diversity and the impact that it has on students when they have a same race teacher, linguistic, cultural experience that's shared. And so one of the things that we'd love to know is if the administration has plans to prioritize diversification within the educator pipeline. But then additionally, there's current state legislation that Latinos for Education is leading on called the Educator Diversity Act, which I know Mari is pretty familiar with, but nonetheless, we would appreciate anything the administration would be willing to do in the form of a letter to legislative leadership urging them to take this bill up, which would transform some elements of licensure, data transparency, hiring practices, and create new funding to be able to diversify the educator workforce. So that's quite a bit there, but would love to hear Maybe Jose, from your perspective about this particular issue.
Sure, Brother Manny, I appreciate the way you were able to articulate that and just really hit it on the head. I'm sure you have an email drafted for Madi that you can definitely just send that information just in regards to the letter. So although this is not underneath my purview directly, what I will share just in terms of what my priority has been is to, within the first 100 days, is to visit all of my community centers. And so we have 35 throughout the city. In every single neighborhood, right? And so it's that and the Boston Public Libraries. And part of the goal for that is for me to see what's happening on the ground level directly, to meet the staff, to make sure, just to get a sense whether or not it's reflective of the community, to find out what the programming that's available. And many of our Boston Public Libraries and our Boston communities for youth and families offer ESL classes, offer workforce development, resume building, you name it, right? And just so I'm really trying to get a sense of what's happening and what's not happening. And so I have a better charge of how it is that we need to move forward. A lot of that too is to be able to make sure that it's equity across the board. To your point about the Great Resignation, hiring is definitely a challenge at the moment. And so I'm trying to be able to fully support our staff and our centers, make sure that they get the staff that's one, reflective of the community in which they're serving, of the young people that they're serving, but also that they get the quality, employees that they need to be able to make sure that the programming is meeting our expectations. And so that's been part of my job within the first 100 days. Mind you, I've only gotten around to about 16. In addition to that, is that a good portion of our centers are actually combined with Boston Public Schools. And so that's roughly about the tune of about 12 or 15. So another one of my goals is to make sure that we have strong partnerships with BPS and establishing what does the school community center partnership look like, to make sure that we have continuation between what takes place during the school day and our after school programming. And as we know, like a lot of learning does happen out of school time. And so I really want to make sure that we uplift that and reflect that in the work that we're doing. And so any information that you have on that research, which I have a lot from historical knowledge and experience, but yet I want to make sure that we're being all inclusive and that we have a holistic approach to how it is that we're supporting the young people in our city.
Thank you, Chief. And with that note, we are going to close. But before we do, Gladys Oliveros, do you want to say hello, introduce yourself? You have to unmute. You have to unmute. We can't hear you, Gladys.
Don't go without me. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. And HOA for you, for Latinx and the team. These are the spaces that we need to open up. And from my corner here in the City Hall, please, I'm here. The doors are open, Spanish, and Spanish.
Well, thank you all for bearing with us as we were running late. On behalf of the Amplify Latinx organization and leaders, I want to thank Amplify and thank all of you as well. We will be sharing an updated list of contacts, including contacts for everyone in the meeting and in the mayor's office, to make communication more accessible. And we just want to thank all of you for the leadership that you bring to this space. And thank you, Rosario, and your team for convening us today. It is amazing. We would not be able to do the work we do without Amplify Latinx serving as a conduit, as a convener. It is critical for these conversations on policy and advocacy. And thank you to so many funders and to people who are exercising leadership in housing, education, every space. My heart is with each and every one of you. Muchas gracias y tengan un lindísimo día.
Muchas gracias a todos. Gracias, Iván, for facilitating. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon. Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.